Hello, fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I wanted to go over what I read in October and also talk about what is coming up on the channel. But before I get into that, I have some sad news. My brother Jason, who is one half of Liminal Spaces for the last year that we've been doing it, is sadly leaving the channel. We started this when he was kind of in a transition. Our transition has ended. His workload has increased immensely, so he just doesn't have time to do this regularly with me. So, of course, Jason will always be welcome to make videos on the channel here. Basically, what it came down to is when he has time and feels like he wants to make a video about something that he's read or watched, he will do so, and it will go up on the channel. But you won't be hearing from him, 2 videos a week like we have been for the last little while. It'll be a lot rarer that you hear from Jason, which leaves the channel, of course, in my hands, which I'm very happy to take. I love the channel and have been enjoying it so much. So good luck to Jason. Of course, you'll hear from him again in the future. It just won't be as regularly. All right. I had quite a wild October. Read some wonderful, wonderful books. And I'm just going to go over them really quick. Of course, you can go back and watch the videos on these books that I put up earlier. But just really quick, I read one of my favorite vampire stories, which is Carmela by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. Absolutely incredible vampire story with lesbian themes, which is really shocking for the age of the story. So yeah, I've always loved this story, so this was kind of a classic for me, rereading a classic, but I really enjoyed talking about that. These aren't in any order. This isn't like my ranking or anything like that. I'm going to do a huge ranking at the end of the year of all the books I've read, so you can look forward to that after New Year's. I also got to read Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I feel like Shirley Jackson and a lot of the horror writers from the 50s and the 60s, some in the 40s I would guess too, are kind of ignored. And it's strange for me because whenever I read horror history, there is this leap where we go from Lovecraft to King. And I always found that leap very weird. But, of course, really what's at the core of this concept is the question of kind of supernatural gothic romances. Are these horror books? Should they be included in the history of horror? I believe they should. Books like Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, I think absolutely belong in the horror genre, but some might disagree. And where do we draw that line between gothic romance and horror? It's very difficult. And I bring that up because I think Shirley Jackson, although more of a horror writer than, say, Daphne du Maurier or some of those others, still kind of falls towards the gothic, especially with this one, which is We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which I read over the Halloween holiday, and it was super fun. I come from a small town, have connections with a small town. We still have property in the small town, and I feel like this is the best novel I've read to kind of sum up the feelings of ancestral history that people can get in small towns surrounding the houses where many generations have grown up, but also the general atmosphere of a small town, how it can be at times incredibly caring, but also at times incredibly judgmental. This was a wild read and one that I really enjoyed. I also read a couple of Ambrose Beer stories. I had started reading The King in Yellow, and then I found out that Ambrose Beer created the concept of Carcosa and Hastur, so I read 2 Ambrose Beer stories. I'm definitely going to be reading more Ambrose Beer. He was incredible. I love his prose style. He has a real poetic sensibility. I think that I'm going to like a lot of his. And one of the books stories that I didn't talk about that I read a long time, I think it's called The Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. I think that's what it's called. That's the only other Bierce that I've read, and I do plan on reading a lot more. But last but not least, I was going to quickly read this, and this was going to be one video where I was going to talk about The King in Yellow. That turned out not to be the case. I spent most of the Halloween spooky season or Halloween month going over stories in The King in Yellow. I have a very hard time reading a book of stories and trying to make one video on them because I want to talk about every story. So that's kind of what I ended up doing with this one. I didn't do every story in the book. I left off the last three. But diving into this was so much fun because I had to read it twice in order to make videos on it, and doing that really opened up a lot of links that I didn't initially see. I know that it might have dragged for you guys. Some of you might not have been in to me doing story by story of The King in Yellow, but thank you for putting up with that because it was really what I needed to do to tackle this book, and I really enjoyed being able to do that. All right. Moving on to things that I've been reading that I'll be making videos of in the next couple of weeks. While I was doing all that King in Yellow stuff, I was reading Conjuring Wife by Fritz Leiber. This is Leiber's first novel, and it was a riot. I'm very excited to talk about this book. There is so much to say about it. It's a quick read. It's like 190 pages. If you want to read it over the weekend, so that you can be ready for me to talk about it, that is, I think, incredibly doable. So that's one of the things that I'll be talking about in the upcoming week. The other book that I read, actually I listened to on Audible, was the third book in the Southern Reach trilogy or Area X trilogy, Acceptance. And I wasn't a huge fan of the second book. If you remember my review on that, I feel like the third book was better, and I will talk about that a lot deeper in the review that I go over on that. So I'll be talking about that. Also, the fourth book in that series, called Absolution, came out, and I went and grabbed a copy, although I am listening to it on Audible. I grabbed it because if I talk about it on the channel, I have a shelf that has all the books I've talked about in this channel in order, so I want to have something to put on the shelf. So I bought this one. I am listening to it now on Audible, and it started rocky. I'm still only like a third in. It started kind of rocky. There's been some interesting stuff, but I'll have a lot to say about that as I continue to read through it. Another book that I'm reading right now that I am absolutely enjoying, hopefully it keeps up this weird pace, we'll see if it can, is The Hole in the Zero by M.K. Joseph. This thing is strange. It's going to take me a bit to read it. Also, I've invited Ira from SF Words of Wonder to come onto the channel and talk about it as well. So, we're going to kind of read it simultaneously and talk about it. If you'd like to join us, so far I'm 53 pages in, and this has been a mind bender, but it's not difficult to follow. It's once you get who the four people are and kind of what the ground situation is, this novel is pretty easy to follow, but I don't know what's going to happen from here because the stakes in this are huge. So if you'd like to read along with us, grab this book and read along with us. It's a lot of fun so far. We'll see how I feel once I get to the end of it, but so far I'm really, really enjoying it. So, all right, that's what you can expect from the channel in the coming week. I'm at kind of a weird conundrum because Conjuring Wife has been made into, I think, 4 movies. I think this book has been made into 4 movies. And one of them is a movie, I forgot what it was originally called. I'll talk about it when I go over this. But it became a movie called Burn Witch Burn, which was a rename. And there actually is another author who wrote a book called Burn Witch Burn. And then they released this book with the movie title Burn Witch Burn. So it gets very confusing. But I feel like now that I've completed this, I should absolutely watch that movie and come and talk about it on the channel. But it's really hard for me because Jason, of course, was trained in acting and was able to break down movies in ways that I don't feel as confident. I'm trained in breaking down texts and written words, so Yeah, I can't decide. Maybe I'll try to get him to come back and talk about movies like that every once in a while. If I read a book that has a movie about it, I might try to rope him back in and see if I can get him to do that. Or I might try to do it myself, but I just don't feel very qualified, so we'll see. All right, I hope everybody had a wonderful Halloween season, and we will see you soon. If you liked this video, please click like, and if you like this kind of content, please subscribe, because I'll be making a lot more of it in the future. Thank you so much for watching.